And, being a critic always, you don't just accept, but yes, you move and you get across from the journey of skepticism to acceptism. Takes a while, took a while for me. And I always would say to any of the doctors or any general public who is listening to this wonderful podcast is that please experience. Do not dump the idea just sheerly because you fail after a couple of days. Just experience it longer, experience it enough, because that is where the magic lies. That is where the cure lies. That is where the change lies. This is my spiritual teacher, and I always talk this about the anecdote. Many years back, I met her. I was just about 16, 17 years old. And she would go meditate 4 a.m. This is the rising sun in UAE last couple of years back when she was here. And before many years back, I would say, oh, I'm happy horizontally meditating. I don't think so. I need to wake up this early, first of all. And I don't think so. I need to meditate because I don't see any reason or rhyme for it. Then came a very deep personal crisis in my life. I had a very dear childhood friend, 20, 23 years of relationship. And then suddenly one fine day that was broken. The pain was really sheer deep. And sometimes they say that the pain of such a breakup can be equivalent to breaking a few bones. So as physical as you can feel, and in that emotional trauma, emotional torture that I went through, and I had no sort of respite. It was a very restless feeling. I thought, let's go and try meditation, let's go and try some breathing practices, because all that was happening in my brain. And I was very fortunate. I could take the brain back to the laboratory and say, hey, what's happening in my emotional brain? What is really kicking in there? And I was able to see relevant changes and then sort of monitor it, track it. And then essentially the first thing that changed my life was breathing practice. And then came, of course, the meditation. So everything became more like an experiential journey, because that pain was something which I wanted to break free. I really, yielded to break free because it was beyond me to handle. Now, all of us go through either a deep pain, which is what is beautifully said in Japanese kensho, or you just get an insight. Possibly, as I'm talking to you, you may relate to your incidents, what could have happened in your life, and you can say, oh, yeah, Dr. Shweta went through this, and possibly that applies to me as well. And boom, that insight is enough to change your life, which we call Satori. All of us go through these experiences. And sometimes these experiences come as patterns, not just because the universe is deciding to give it to you as patterns or there is a package deal which is happening. It's essentially because you as a person or you as a brain is not learning that lesson to move on. Your circuits are still firing the same way. Your circuits are reacting still the same way. Your reaction has not changed to the response. So it is essentially the same thing which you will keep getting back and forth. So when I say I did my brain scan, this is the picture how a QEEG appears, the quantitative EEG analysis. So we do take a normal EEG, but then we run through special algorithms. We at the lab have made our own special software where it runs through every single portion of the brain just to understand what part of the brain is firing, what is really happening inside the brain in the front portion, in the back portion, what are the connectivity types, what is both the sides of the brain talking, etc. It's a very detailed analysis. Now, if I were to talk about the brain a little bit, because that would put things into perspective. Why should we do certain things that we should do? So if I take the brain, first of all, I have the left and the right hemisphere. And these two are the ones separated by a very, very thick bridge called corpus callosum. Most of us are into practice and we understand the way the brain is arranged. But let me just give a very quick insight. This is very superficial because currently we have a lot of networks identification. Lots of work has gone into identifying certain networks, certain ways in which clusters of cells are organized, the way in which the entire thing operates. The common networks are salience network, attention network, default mode network. When I'm not just doing anything, let's say I'm just sitting here, automatically my default mode network will lead me to ask questions about myself. Automatically, there will be a self-inquiry which will set in. And that's the job of the salience network. The moment I want to remember something, my first thing would be my attentional network would be active. Oh, please tell me am I supposed to remember, etc. So all these networks are beautifully arranged, but a little bit difficult to complex to understand. So the best way to understand is going to be that there are three parts of the brain. Essentially, this hypothesis is also fairly old. Some of you who are real neuroscientists would agree to that. But let's make it bare, like absolute uber simple for the people to understand. So there is one bottom called the brain stem. That brain stem is where I'm breathing, my pulse is there, my heart is beating, all my essential survival functions are happening. It is also called the reptilian complex. I go a little further up, there are 3 or 4 important set of clusters like hippocampus, cingulate gyrus, insula. This is where my emotional cortex lies. So all my emotions, also called the limbic. So for this entire session, we will put it as limbic system. And then when I go up fourth is all where my rational cortex or neo-mammalian complexes. This is a very, very important part because when we study the peak performers, what we see is they have a very well developed frontal part. We all know that the cover of the frontal part does not begin by the age of 22 to 25. That's why teenagers can be very difficult when it comes to decision making, because this part of the brain is important in a few things. One is intuition, judgment about what is good and bad, rationalization of any idea, looking forwards what is going to happen, the future, and essentially regulation of my emotional response. Now, emotional brain is very important because I should be able to feel, if there is a care, if there is love, if there is concern, if there is trust, I should be able to feel that. But at the same time, the same emotional brain is also trying to warden off or cordon off the threats. And in good old times, the threats used to be lions and tigers. So our hunters, when we were hunters, we would have to get rid of these threats. So our emotional system was always ready of guarding us, protecting us. But in today's time, if we look at the threats, they are, okay, newspaper says outage. Yesterday, there was a big, huge CrowdStrike outage, right? And what happened was the IT was shut down. All the planes could not fly in Heathrow. So this is a threat. Today, if I have to travel and then that becomes a threat, my boss email suddenly talking about something which is out of the blue where my job can be threatened, a friend's email talking completely, they've become a little bit of a touchy in that regards. So the emotional system is trying to protect and say, hey, there's a threat. Yes, there is a threat. There is a threat. And it's always in this fight, flight, fear, or freeze mode. Rightly so, because it wants to protect you. But when it overruns, and this is like a balance, it's like a little switch. When the emotional system is overrun, it's completely active, your frontal cortex is shut. When that frontal cortex is shut, you don't think right. Very clear example, go back to your anger. Just remember one time when you were super, super angry. What will happen is immediately you can't think rationally. In the anger, you would blurt out everything and then you would wonder, oh, I should not have said that, because then your system 2 or your rational system sort of catches in. And Daniel Kahneman has beautifully, beautifully suggested that as system 1 and system 2 in his, I think, Nobel Prize winning book. So it's a very simplistic mode of understanding, but very important. Now, we as humans have got this amazing facility for this frontal cortex. Now, look at the animals. The frontal cortex is really small and the limbic is big and the cervical cortex is big. So if we as humans have to explore our entire potential, if we were to bring in all the best things that you and me can do, then we need to focus on building, really strongly building this frontal cortex, without which nothing can happen. Now, the same thing for our patients. If the patient is stressed, if there is burnout, if there is too much of trauma happening in the person's life, and trauma can be micro emotional traumas, which is just enough, people come and talk to us about all the relational issues. There's lots of, I was just looking into the divorce rates, and there is a big, huge divorce inventory, which is published of late. There's 74% divorce rate in one of the countries, I think it was Russia. That's just alarming. That's just incredible, right? So the question comes is, there is so much of a disconcordance happening when it comes to relationship. So when the person is stressed, this prefrontal cortex is out. There's weaker control of emotions, and then you don't know what you're acting out, because you may be acting out completely in a state of emotional disarray, and that may not be the right state.